Hi, friends. Welcome to another 5 Minutes of Hope. I'm the reluctant missiologist, and in this installment, I want to share some of the backstory for how I got the name reluctant missiologist. Reluctant can maybe shape some of the many stories in my life and ministry and mission, but for the very beginning, I think it shapes how I viewed myself as being one on mission somewhere over there. Now, for my calling, I was called to missions. It was a very clear calling. I was at a camp. I was in a moment where I really clearly felt compelled by God to be in missions, to be one of those that went over there. It was a clear sense of going over there. Now, in hindsight, we can do mission in many ways. It doesn't always have to be across the ocean, but for me, that's what I felt God was saying in a certain moment, and yet immediately I started to reinterpret it a whole other way. I had a picture of what I really wanted to do for God. I felt like I could do all these wonderful things, and I could create my own identity as somebody in ministry and doing mission-minded things, reaching people that didn't know Jesus, helping them get rooted in their faith, really making God relevant in this world, making Christianity relevant. And I had all these ideas of what I could do for God. I had a great imagination, or what some might call a vision for my life. And yet, in the end, in hindsight, all of these things that I imagined myself doing, they never really happened. Yet God had a wonderful sense of humor. As I think about it even now, I'm reminded of Leslie Newbegin's saying that if you want to make God laugh, tell him what you're going to do, or tell him about your plans for your life. And I think that's really true. If I think through what I was doing, making all these plans for my life, what I was going to do, it was going to look like this and look like that. And I can imagine God just smiling, chuckling, laughing as I created my own future. And yet God already had ideas in his mind of what I was going to do. And he made it clear, not just in that one moment, but even in another moment where somebody had come to my church and given a word from God that I was going to be on an airplane and traveling overseas and all this stuff. She also talked about a guitar and learning guitar. That was the thing I held on to. I wanted to learn guitar. That would make me even more cool, along with the other things I had in mind for doing ministry. And yet, it was actually when I finally found myself in Bangkok, Thailand, with my wife serving in what I thought was her calling to missions for a time, and so we could then do the next thing, which was what I wanted to do. That God was reminding me of something he'd said years and years earlier. And it was this place where I had friends saying, it's great seeing you fulfill what God had called you to, that I was confused and wondered, and then was brought back to that time at camp and these other words and other times where God was speaking to me about missions. And the interesting thing was, even though I was reluctant for many years and dismissive of going over there, that it was when I was there that things that God was doing in me, really, the things that God did in me and through me, were quite interesting and fun and wonderful and beyond my wildest imaginations. What God did actually do through me, what God actually did through me was far more fascinating and wonderful and worth telling stories about. It wasn't even Thailand wouldn't have been my first choice, and yet that's where God put me. And it was a great place and a great time. And the 6 years I spent doing mission in Bangkok, Thailand, were some of the greatest memories I have, and some of the greatest friends I have came out of those times. And so we can be reluctant to do what God says, and yet when we finally do go where God wants us to go, we can see God fulfill many things in us. And so even in the midst of a name like reluctant missiologist, we can see that God is constantly shaping and molding and moving us to where he wants us to be. And I never at once felt like, oh, I got here too late. It was right at the right time to be the person at the right place where God wanted me to be. And so when I look back on it, I often say this: even when we forget where God wanted us to be, as long as we stay close to Him, He'll get us to where we want to be. Or maybe even as we're reluctant or reimagine or re-envision all the things God could do in our life, as long as we stay with Him, He will take us to where He wants us to be. And it'll often look far different than we ever thought or dreamed or imagined. And yet, it will be way better than anything we dreamed or imagined. So with that in mind, keep on grabbing onto Jesus and sticking close to Him, and He'll take you to where He wants you to be. And we'll talk again soon.